Hello, this is Heather Deacon, Senior Director of Finance and Operations and Treasurer for National Capital Presbytery, and welcome to our 2026 budget presentation. I want to begin just by thanking you all for your patience as we pulled together the 2026 budgets. As I shared in Thursday Mail and in the giving statement letters, the 2026 budgets were delayed just a bit, really as we prayerfully considered the best ways to address the current economic conditions with these budgets. And I also want to thank you for just setting aside a few minutes to watch. I hope that you will find our time together useful. So I always like to begin these budget presentations by walking you through how our budgets are developed. And for us, developing the budget really starts with a familiar premise. As Presbyterians, we believe in the connectional nature of the church. And we are connected by our polity and obviously by our faith. But I also believe that we are connected by our budgets, or rather, the monies used to create our budgets in National Capital Presbytery. Those monies really connect us to each other, and I'd like to show you. I'd like to show you how that works. If we start with the money, we have three main sources. We have the faithful witness of yesterday's saints, and that often takes the form of endowments. We also have funds that have been received from dissolutions and from property sales. And then we have funds that are received from our churches, and those typically come in as unified giving, as per capita, and as special offerings. We also have funds, or as the money flows through the budgets, you'll see that the presbytery generally supports growth opportunities, it supports ministries of our churches, and it supports leadership development. And then, kind of when you take a step back, you begin to see how the money really flows through our budgets and each area connects to another area. So, as you prayerfully consider these budgets, I hope that the idea that they connect us as a presbytery to each other, to our churches, to our communities, really to our past and to our future. I hope that that idea of connection stays in the forefront of your mind. Now, rooted in that connection, you're going to see how the development process works. Budget development falls broadly into three main areas. The budget guidance memo, the committee reports, committee requests, and then our funding plan. The process starts with the budget memo. Budget and Finance develop that guidance memo, and in doing this, they evaluate and really analyze the economic landscape and our giving trends. And then, based on that analysis, this year, the 2026 guidance memo that people received, that recommended that committees make reductions wherever possible, given what we were predicting and seeing in our economy. The committee and the commissions, they get that memo, they review their current year budgets, and they assess the work that they feel like they're being called to do in 2026 to determine the resources that are needed to do that work. Those requests will then come back to Budget and Finance, and they begin compiling the budgets. Now, once the requests have been received and input into the budgets, Budget and Finance begins creating the funding plan. And that plan really has two big components. The recommended annual draws off of our investments, and then the per capita rate. Once the funding plan is put into the budgets are ready to be reviewed. And that really starts with Budget and Finance reviewing and voting on their draft budgets that have been created. And then from there, that budget goes to Leadership Council, who then reviews and votes on that draft budget. And then that brings us to kind of where we are right now, where the presbytery, you all review, and then you will vote on this draft budget at the November presbytery meeting. And all of those steps bring us towards having our finalized budgets for 2026. Now, You heard me mention budgets as in plural, and I hope that everyone is aware, but in case you aren't, National Capital Presbytery has two budgets. We have an operating budget and we have a mission budget. And so, speaking broadly, our operating budget funds National Capital Presbytery staff, it funds the office, it funds expenses, office expenses. It funds the Committee on Ministry and the Commission on Preparation for Ministry, so COM and CPM. And then it also funds various middle governing body expenses. Then you get onto the mission budget, and the mission budget funds National Capital Presbytery's mission staff. It funds congregational development, and it funds the Mission Coordination Committee. As we kind of dive into these budgets, we're going to start with our mission budget. And as you can see from the graphic, the mission budget really funds a variety of things. I'm not going to list them all here, but I do encourage you to take a look at the 2026 draft budget and highlights page that are in your packet that paint a much fuller picture. Generally speaking, mission budget does just what it says. It funds the mission priorities of not just National Capital Presbytery, but of the churches that make up our presbytery. And so the 2026 mission budget, as proposed, is $992,964.16, which represents a 7.6 decrease over 2025. And as we kind of move through this slide, there are a few things that we would like to lift out. First, we are seeing a 7.1% decrease in the draw off of the new growth fund this year, and that is due entirely to a grant from the PCUSA that we received in the amount of $50,000, which is to be used for funding the Missional Incubator Program in 2026. The draw off of our new growth fund is 42% of our mission budget for 2026. CDC and MCC again presented a combined budget this year, and you'll note that there is a 16.9% decrease over 2025. In setting this year's budget, we prepared and presented a summary of historic spending going back to 2019 to CDC and MCC. And in doing this, what we learned was that historically, CDC and MCC, they rarely spent all of their budgets. So our 2026 budget number they better align with actual spending. And during that meeting, we lifted up ways that they could access additional monies mid-year if it was needed. So kind of trying this on and seeing how it works, knowing there are ways that we can access additional funds if needed. Making this shift also allowed us to balance the budget without tapping into our mission reserves, saving those reserves for use if we are unable to meet our unified mission giving projections. The last item on the spotlight is a 29% increase in the mission budget calibration factor. The calibration factor is both a tool to help us move towards a unified budget, just like the larger church has done over the last handful of years. But it also accounts for how much time staff put into work related to the mission of the presbytery. And we haven't looked at this calibration closely for years beyond just making cost of living adjustments. And so we feel like the number in this year's budget better reflects the amount of time that staff spend on mission related work. For example, all of the excellent work that's done to connect and communicate, within the presbytery. When we talk about funding the mission budget, we really have 5 sources. We have unified giving, we have the NCP Resurrection Fund, the DC Resurrection Fund, the New Growth Fund, and then mission reserves. Unified mission giving is separate from per capita. They are not the same thing. Unified mission giving is money given specifically by our churches to support the mission of the presbytery. And participation in unified giving we really feel like is a vital part of living into the connected nature of our presbytery. These dollars really flow out into our communities through our congregations, connecting our churches to each other through shared work. And we will talk a little bit more about unified giving in a moment, but it really is a critical part of funding the mission budget. Next, you have the NCP and DC resurrection funds. Draws off of the interest of these funds provide a consistent layer of funding over for our mission budget. And below you can see that both of the projected year-end 2025 balances and the anticipated draws off of these funds for 2026. And these draws are derived just from a mathematical calculation. Just in case anyone is wondering, a mathematical calculation is how we arrive at these numbers. The new growth fund specifically funds seed money for new projects and work done with the New Things team under the direction of CDC. And this is where you'll find the funding for the Missional Incubator Program comes from. The anticipated draw and the current balance are shown for this fund as well. And you'll see here that all of those draws to date are in alignment with our historical draws. So nothing is considered really out of the ordinary. And then lastly, we have mission reserves. These reserves are from years prior when the entire mission budget wasn't spent. And so excess funds that were budgeted and not spent would go into mission reserves. For the last few years, we balanced the mission budget using our reserves. And as you can see here, the reserves are diminishing, which is a large reason why our proposed 2026 mission budget does not call for a draw off of these monies. We'll discuss the giving trends here in just a moment, but we did feel like given the current economic climate, and specifically in our region, it was prudent to stop balancing the budget with these reserves and preserve them for use in times when we may not meet our unified mission giving projections. And that has been the case. That was the case last year, and we anticipate that being the case again this year. All right, so on this slide, you're going to see the trend in unified mission giving that I just spoke about, the dollars that fund our congregational development, our transforming grants, our mission grants, our college ministry programs, our fellowships. That giving is down 36% over the last 10 years. 2024 really saw a dramatic decrease over 2023 and came in under projections. In 2024, 48 of our 103 churches gave to Unified Mission Giving, which is down 5 churches from those that gave in 2023. 2025 giving is slightly ahead of 2024, but we still anticipate falling short of the 2025 budgeted projections. And so as such, we are projecting a 10% reduction in Unified Mission Giving for 2026. And so that will allow us to wrap up the mission budget. I want to leave you with just a couple of actions. First, please review the mission budget details, which are included in the budget packet, and then come with any questions to the action item dialogue on Monday, November the 17th, ahead of the November Presbytery meeting on the 18th. You can also email any questions to the NCP office. And then lastly, you're going to see right here on the screen the motion that you will be asked to vote on at the November Presbytery meeting. And this would essentially set that mission budget in for 2026. Now we are going to turn over to the operating budget. Let me go back one slide here. There we go, the operating budget. Just like with the mission budget, you'll see on this graphic some of the items that the operating budget funds. Again, I'm going to recommend you take a look at the 2026 draft operating budget in the packet and the highlights page, which is going to give you a more complete picture. But for simplicity's sake, I like to say that the operating budget covers all of the things that it takes to actually run the presbytery and its office in order to meet our responsibilities as laid out by our polity. All right, the 2026 operating budget as proposed, $1,297,178.68, which represents a decrease of 3.5% over 2025. And I'm going to review just a handful of highlights again to introduce it to you. So we are proposing a 2% decrease in office expenses for 2026. The increase in COM of 15.8%, and this is really due to their desire to offer more robust trainings and workshop opportunities in 2026. Middle governing body expenses decreased by just over 21%. And this is really due mostly to just removing the continuing education retreat out of the budget. This event, for which registration is open, just so you know, registration for the 2026 event is open. But this event is now self-sufficient between the retreat fund and the registration fees. So based on the recommendation from our bookkeeping firm, we are moving it out of the operating budget and it reports separately in our financial statements. Lastly, you're going to note a 5.6% decrease in the personnel budget, and this is due to an increase in the calibration number that moves monies from staff of the mission budget into the operating budget. I discussed this much more in depth in the mission budget portion of this presentation, but I wanted to point out how that action in the mission budget impacts the operating budget. And then just one final note that it isn't listed on the slide here, but personnel included a 1.35% cost of living increase for presbytery staff, and that is taken into account in the draft budget. All right. When we talk about funding the operating budget, we really have three sources this year. We have the office fund, we have the scholarship fund, and then we have per capita. The office fund was established to offset the cost of operating expenses. It is what keeps our per capita in check. It keeps that number in check. The anticipated balance at the end of this year, you'll see it on the screen, and then you'll see the recommended draw as well. And that recommended draw is the same as the 2025 draw. One item of note is that we do anticipate receiving approximately $164,000 back into this fund in 2026 as we hopefully wrap up and achieve resolution of a piece of property litigation that's currently underway. We had to tap into this fund to do that, and we anticipate receiving those monies back in 2026. So the fund will go up. The scholarship fund supports seminarians and leaders coming out of National Capital Presbytery, and it is administered by CPM. That draw is calculated by a mathematical calculation, is how we arrive at that number. And then again, I want to point out that those draws are normal and in alignment with our historical draws. And then that brings us to per capita. And while it is last on the list, that is not because it is the least important, but rather because of how the rate is calculated each year. Essentially, we back into the number. So once we have the expenses and then deduct the investment draws, we really are just kind of left with what's needed. And that remaining number, that need, is divided by the membership of National Capital Presbytery churches from 2 years prior. So in this case, for 2026, the membership number that we're using is that of 2024, because if you think about it, that really is the most up-to-date number that we have right now would be those 2024 year-end membership numbers that get submitted with your statistical report. So calculating the per capita last allows us, hopefully, to minimize the financial impact of our churches. On the screen now, you're going to see a graph of our NCP membership since 2010. And the numbers, I mean, honestly, they reflect the trend that we know to be true. Our membership is shrinking. Each governing body assessed their per capita on membership numbers from 2024. And for us in National Capital Presbytery, that number decreased by 646 members. I think it's important to say, though, that this is the lowest decline we've seen in recent years. And then each of the governing bodies set their per capita rate to cover their expenses. And the sum of those three amounts is the total per capita amount assessed on each member. And you'll see on the screen, National Capital Presbytery, the Synod of Mid-Atlantic, and General Assembly are the three governing bodies that each set their own per capita rate. All right, here you're going to see our per capita recommendation. We have General Assembly coming in at $11.08, which is a 64-cent increase over the 2025 rate. The Synod rate increased to $1.50, which is a 45-cent increase, and it's their first increase, I believe, in 8 years. And then National Capital Presbytery's proposed rate is $38.70, which makes up a 14-cent increase. And then these three numbers combine to equal a proposed per capita rate of $51.28, which is a total increase of $1.13. And you'll see here it's based off the membership of 21,811 members. All right, as we finish up the 2026 operating budget, you'll again note that you have a couple of actions. The good news is they are identical to the actions for the mission budget. We ask that you review the operating budget details, which are included in the budget packet. We ask that you consider coming to the action item dialogue on Monday, November the 17th, ahead of the November Presbytery meeting on the 18th. And just a reminder, you can certainly email any questions that you have around these budgets to the NCP office. And then lastly, at the bottom, you see the motion that you will be asked to vote on at that November Presbytery meeting. All right, as we wrap up the 2026 budget presentation, I want to leave you with just a few highlights. We are presenting balanced operating and mission budgets. We are no longer balancing the mission budget off of reserves. The work to unify our operating and mission budgets remains underway. 44% of the mission budget is allocated to the new things team, which includes the missional incubator, and then this comes entirely, this comes entirely from the New Growth Fund and the PCUSA grant. And then lastly, our total per capita increase for 2026 is $1.13. All right. I'll finish by just taking us back to the slide that we started with. The idea that our budget is one of the things that connects us to each other. It connects us to our past and to our future. And then as we reflect on that connection and how we are called to participate in it, I want to add that the work being done by us as a presbytery in our communities and in the support of our mission to be missional, pastoral, and prophetic so that our churches can grow. That's what our mission is. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to the November Presbytery meeting.